I just got off the call with Duo Dickinson at our monthly expert training session, our HSW expert training session at EntreArchitect Network. And I was so inspired and excited about the presentation. I was thinking, I'm going to share this with my audience. I'm going to share this with the podcast audience, and we're going to share it on YouTube as well, because it's a presentation that I want everybody to hear and see. If you're listening to it on the podcast, it's going to be interesting, but there's lots of visuals, so you may want to listen to the podcast because it's definitely great to hear Duo speak. But if you're interested in watching Duo's presentation and seeing the visuals, it'll be over on YouTube as well at the EntreArchitect channel. And so I hope you are inspired by this as well. If you are inspired by it, you should come join us at EntreArchitect Network, because twice a month we do expert training session webinars. This is an example of one of those webinars. So we do a business webinar and we do an HSW webinar every month. So members get 24 AIA credits every year. 12 of them are HSW. And so if you're interested, entrearchitect.com/30 days will give you free 30 days. So you can try it out for a month. Try out 2 of our sessions for free, and everything else you have. There's business resources and a great community. You should check it out at entrearchitect.com/30 days. On to Duo. I hope you are inspired as me. Enjoy. Today is Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. My name is Mark R. LePage. Welcome to this EntreArchitect expert training session. Today's session is Architecture is Human, an extended version. Member video and audio is currently muted. The session will run for 60 minutes and is approved for 1 HSW learning unit from the AIA. You need to be here for the full 60 minutes, and you need to complete the evaluation form, which will ask you for your AIA information. That'll all be emailed after this session. It'll also be in the HSW Expert Training Session channel. The deadline to submit the evaluation form for me to manage this process is this Friday. So as soon as you get the evaluation form, just return it to us, and that will be very helpful. Certificates of completion, email us at admin@entrearchitect.com, and Dawn will get you a certificate of completion if you need one. We'll be training for about 45 minutes. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. You're encouraged to post away in the chat. If you have any questions along the way, please post them in the Q&A. We love your questions, so do that. Post them in the Q&A window. Please join me in welcoming our friend Duo Dickinson. He's back. Duo spoke at TCAM 24, and he received incredible feedback, lots of positive thoughts and feelings towards Duo and his presentation. So we've invited him back to dive a little deeper and extend a little bit on his session in Nashville. Today's expert training session continues his presentation, Architecture is Human, a compelling exploration of how design, ethics, and humanity intersect in our profession. Duo brings decades of wisdom, wit, and heart to everything he does, and we're honored to have him here with us. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a good friend of our community. Duo Dickinson, welcome to the expert training sessions.
Mark, thanks for inviting me then, now, future, and I think there was even some stuff I did in the past. So yes. I am an ongoing flow of whatever I'm flowing. So
we've done several podcasts together. Right?
Several podcasts together. That's right. And speaking, by the way, speaking of podcasts, Mark, how about that?
Was that good? Was that a good?
That was good. That was good. Everybody here should know that I write every month for Common Edge Collaborative, but I also host a live radio show on WPKN, and I'm also a fellow in the AIA, which means that those 3 groups got together, and we are doing a podcast, and we're going to be doing our 3rd one in a month. We've already had Kurt Anderson, the great commentator. We've had Witold Rubczynski, the great architect and book writer. We've had Kate Wagner, the McMansion goddess. We've had Mark Kimmelman, who's the New York Times architecture editor. So we've had really incredibly great guests. And the goal of that podcast is to not talk with architects to architects.
Yeah.
to basically talk about what architecture design is in people's lives. Whereas this is an AI seminar, and I will be speaking in code, the code that we all speak. What I'll also be doing is trying to broaden the perspective of the people listening beyond what you normally get in things like this, which is a lot of inside baseball.
Yeah.
So if
And much of your
I'm,
work through the years has been that. And so I thank you for that.
would you like me just to launch? Because I can absolutely launch whenever you say.
You're ready to roll. It's all yours.
All right, very good. So first of all, thank you very much. This talk did go unbelievably well in Nashville. I was terrified because it was a 25-minute time window, and I did do it in 25 minutes. It was kind of terrifying. And then when I got the ask to sort of reprise this, I said, great. And I said, how long is it? 45 minutes. So there's a few deletions, a few additions, but what we should know is that there are two specific areas which were directly related to other presentations. One of which was I was asked to give a talk in front of the what's called the Nature of Order seminar. And if you know what Nature of Order is, it's Christopher Alexander's thing, and it's with the Building Beauty Group, where I'm on the board and have been with them since they started. And 7 years ago, they asked me to do a talk, and I was asked to be part of it. And the other is basically a talk that I gave in front of my students at the University of Hartford. I'm a adjunct professor there teaching design and a seminar. So this has got some interesting aspects to it, but it does follow this one principle, which I divined about a decade ago when I thought, well, I've been doing this at that time for over 30 years. I said, all of you people are architects that are listening. I'm assuming all of you have to deal with all the minutia and all the unbelievable devotion of building things and designing things, so that it's not just a problem solving exercise, it's also a creation exercise. But it's not only that, but it's also a practical implementation building exercise. It's an incredibly difficult life to lead. And I asked myself, why did I do this? And people come to ask me for jobs or whatever, and to have students, and they say, why should I do this? And I said, really, the only reason is that you cannot do anything else. Because there's really probably nothing as human that I know that involves the world as architecture. You can be a cleric and be extremely human, but it's really one-to-one. A psychotherapist, you can be a doctor, but it's about the human condition. Almost every other profession, what it boils down to is that you're doing things to create value, to make money. And it rules out a little bit who you are, and it basically says the end product is money. Well, I think nobody on this call probably does what they do here to make money. They do it because it's their calling, it's what they do. And that means that, to me, you're a human. It means that you aren't the bee that basically does what he's been or she's been programmed to do for millennia, that actually is about instinct. I think for us, instinct is completely inadequate. And that's fully represented in the way we gather and who we are. And, spirituality means a lot to people, but it's not just that. It's just our own sense that places like EntreArchitect can be incredibly vital, because that's part of the human condition and what we need to sustain. And I think that could be translated to better architecture with architects, because all of what we do is from a human to a human. And I think that gets in the craw of a lot of people in the profession, because the truth is we are an outcome judging profession. I just submitted today 3 projects for a competition. I'm a very important person, in case you hadn't known this. I've won 60 competitions. And what I actually say to people is, yes, and I have lost over 300 competitions. And what that means is I suck. So basically, in the sort of Major League Baseball world of averages, I'm below the Mendoza line. I'm a very bad architect. But having said that, I don't do it for that, even though I submit all these things. And because I don't do it for that, I can actually see what design can be beyond that. And for this little project we did in actually almost 15 years ago, in central Connecticut. This is for a camp that I went to in 1963. There was the upper left-hand image. That's the little chapel that was erected like 30 years before that. It was falling down, and they wanted to be able to get all the kids that you saw in that picture before. You wanted to get all of those kids underneath the drip line of this. So we created a thing that was in the same location, but took the shape of the chapel and lofted it and made it into a referential thing for those who knew about it. And who, if you didn't know about it, didn't make any difference. But it's only because of the humanistic reality of looking into things, that perspective that we have. I actually think that that's actually what makes architecture go beyond problem solving. That architecture is inevitably human. It's not a product. It's not a process either. It's this thing which has nothing to do with what we're all judged by. Everybody in this Zoom call is judged by style. I mean, I've been called a modernist in derisive terms by traditional architects, and modernist architects simply call me a traditionalist hack. So, in a way, when you decide that there is an outcome-based judgment for what you do, you'll never, ever live up to everyone's expectations. In dealing with these style things, and we're actually probably going to have a kind of a conference on this at the University of Hartford in the fall about the latest presidential order that declares that a legitimate institutional architecture should be traditional. I responded 8 years ago, or no, that's not true, 5 years ago, to the last time this happened, with a talk that basically said, style really has nothing to do with this. Because in DC, where all this is promulgated, we have all these things built over a couple hundred years of what people believe in, and the buildings are, and the constructions are intended to be iconic and reflective. So in one area of the city, um, there's the reflecting pool. On the right, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial. But then if you look to your left, you'll see the Vietnam Memorial. And over time, the Vietnam Memorial's been cited as the most loved, I guess you'd call it, thing in DC. And I think that's simply because it fuses humans and built stuff. And many people hated it when it went up. It was very controversial. The people that go by it now are laughing in the sunlight and walking down. And as you get lower, if you've been there, it gets quiet. And it gets so quiet that every once in a while you hear somebody burst into tears because they feel like they can, because they're with the person they loved. Well, you can also say that those long steps that you take up next door, it's actually the Vietnam Memorial points to Lincoln Monument and Lincoln Memorial. And you're walking up and it's like, oh, it's really nice. Isn't this fun? Oh, that's really cool. It's a temple, blah, blah, blah. And then you see him. And you see basically the exact same human reality, that war kills people. And he knew that he was part of that and had to be. So that thing that spans over a century, one high modernism, one absolutely neoclassical, that's human. It's not style, it's not architecture. That's human. That's us. That's how what we do can actually make people know more about themselves, feel closer about themselves, and feel in touch with our culture. Well, the essence of that to me, that human measurable, beyond the emotional thing, which is hard to define, is that we do understand time. Somehow time for us has a beginning and a middle and an end. And by all the studies other people have shown, no other entity has the sense of beginning and middle and end. You're just where you are now, and that's enough. You don't think about where you came from. You don't think about where you're going. You're an ant. You're an ant. You're an elephant. You're a fish. You're here now, and that's good enough. But I think for us, architects, History really is the other gravity. It's the other universal, unchanging thing, a thing which we can't control, a thing which we can't even fully understand. We can't adjust it. We can't do anything about it. If you do renovations, and I bet you every single one of you on this call has done renovations, you encounter history immediately. On the left, there was a weird wall within a wall on a little building in Madison, Connecticut. On the right, when we recreated a Catholic chapel into something that was there was a little housing unit, we found this. But whether we like it or not, architects live through gravity, um, because it's the one thing that we all experience all the time. And our response as a profession has been really pretty lame. It basically says, oh, history is merely an artifice and a way to justify shallow thinking. To be truly creative, you must make something that's unprecedented and innovative. Or, anything new really is just demeans the human condition and rejects our humanity and really shows that modernism hates our culture and hates humanity. And you can see videos both of this all over the place that say both with the level of religious fervor, which means that you really can't get out of your own way as an architect. I think the mutual exclusivity of this is absolutely asinine. Okay. So there's a great example of this, an exact example of this in New Haven, Connecticut. About 10 years ago, they built two new residential colleges at Yale. And basically, they are about 2 blocks away from two other residential colleges built at Yale about 60 years ago, maybe 70 years ago now. On the left, Robert A.M. Stern channeled James Gamble Rogers, who did the most of the old colleges. James Gamble Rogers was channeling 19th century British revival, Gothic revival architects. And those Gothic revival architects were channeling 13th century medieval architects. So it was layer upon layer of justification and actual using of the past to make something now. Or the flip side, Aaron and Saarinen said basically, no, this is new, and I'm going to make something new. And he did Morrison Styles College. So Morrison Styles College has got very similar things. It's actually got a medieval plan as its basis. But many of the things that those two buildings incorporate are the human experience of how you use them. And the stylistic reality of how they're formed is just how they're formed. Because you can't avoid history. The minute that modernist building, which is now the old building, was formed, it was dated, like everything else. And the stuff that we see around us that is in evolution or in change, that materiality, that architecture will have a beginning, middle, and end just like we will. In New Haven, there was a church that became a bank and then it was torn down. You saw both. On the far left, you saw both the church and the bank simultaneously when they were demolished. The incredible Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, known by Bernard Maybeck, was an amazing but very temporary building that was tried to be maintained, didn't, and then they completely rebuilt it because it was so beautiful. The State House in New Haven was this Greek temple, just like you saw in the Lincoln Memorial, but it was made with plaster and lath and wood, and it simply fell apart. You really can't deny history, and history, you can't create it either, because history is not a style. When we did a renovation and took out a wall, we found 28-inch wide tulip wood exterior cladding on an addition from 100 years ago. And instead of hiding it, we said, that's there. We need to say it's there. In the Episcopal Cathedral in downtown Hartford a couple of years ago, we confronted an Ithiel town building from 1827, and we had to really reinvigorate it. But instead of changing it, we took parts and reused them. That entire wall at the back are the pew ends for all the fixed pews that were removed. The walls that you see on the right, those wooden walls were the backs of those, and they sit in front of walls that are deferential to the gallery above it, which have code compliant bathrooms in them. And you can see that basically the centers are respected, the history of the existing pieces are respected, but also the nature of the architecture is venerated, meaning these columns that were already there were subsumed partially in the walls of the bathrooms, and then celebrated with trim and a perfect repainting. Well, anytime you're touching history as an architect, you do have this conundrum of do I go with history and just copy it, or do I deny it? Well, in my office and in the best architecture that I know, we actually do both at the same time because that's the way we live, right? So essentially, we take Center Hall colonials like you see up there with vinyl siding, and we make additions that are now and also centered and also deal with the existing conditions, but don't replicate them. Whereas Zaha Hadid in Antwerp, down lower left, sort of gave the finger to the building and said, "This is new, it's really new, and screw you, it's new." Roth and Moore, great architecture firm in New Haven to the right, extended a Yale building for the last two bays you see on the left. So the last two bays on the left are brand new. They were built like 25 years ago, and everything to the right was old. And you would never know. That entry was always there. They recreated a building that literally extended the exact vernacular of the building itself. So these things are not good and bad. They're not stylistic. They're just ways of looking at it that says we have to deal with time one way or another. We also have to deal with community, with context. You take a look here, there was an existing community in Yonkers, upper left. We had to come up with 15 units of housing across the street. So we came up with shapes that dealt with getting light and air in all these places and about literally 5 times the density that you see in the upper left. When we make these communities, we either can deny what's there or we can replicate it. Here, this little community you see in the lower right was centered around this existing building on the left that we had to tear down because it was literally falling down. But instead of building something new, which we could have done, it was legal, it was in a protected structure, we replicated it exactly. And that replication then had 7 other buildings built all around it where there were two buildings. There's another building we tore down that was not much. And we made stuff which is a basically 4 times as dense as what was there before, made it walkable to the center of town, all of that stuff, and still connected to the salt marsh that was next to the site. So you can see in the center of the left-hand side, that's our little community. And there's the sound beyond. And there are the little extensions we had from each one of these condominium houses that we did where people could own an area and actually see what's going on. Well, in dealing with old buildings, we also deal with old people. There are a lot of dead people in old buildings. And a bunch of dead people at St. Peter's Church in Cheshire took a very normal Episcopal church and took the chancel, which is where the altar is, and just layered it up. They put what's called a rood screen that you see there inside the chancel where the altar is, so that the altar was hidden from everybody. They made a gigantic altar facing out because that's what was done in the 70s and 80s. At some point in between those two times, they made a communion rail that you see there on the left, and it was layer upon layer upon layer of icons, and the church was dying. So the forward-thinking rector says we have to make a place which can be used by everybody all the time, and if it happens to be church, that's great. So we did, and we made something that actually took what was existing and removed it, but then reasserted it. So you see the root screen gets made. It's a flanking, almost ornamental piece. It's basically gateway is up in the choir loft, and we open things up, and we also use the color that you see on the upper right hand to make the ceiling of the chancel. Those things of connecting past and future with the present, they turn buildings that are dead into buildings that are alive, but with the knowledge of the dead. That's what I call context. So in context, the building that you see on the left is essentially just the dumbest old salt box cape thing that was from 1785 for the core, and then kept on adding on. And we did this incredible series of surgical interior renovations. And the owner said, "I really want an entry." I said, "Oh, well, I'll do a very nice." I said, "No, no, you understand. I really like steel." So how do you sort of deal with steel? Well, here what we did was we made the steel parallel the roof structure, made express different brackets, and centered a window above the door. So essentially, we took what was there, celebrated it, and counterpointed it. On the right, one of the first jobs he ever did, took a carriage house on the right and carried trim lines across and made everything else except for the siding noticeably but quietly different. So the mansard cube could remain a cube, and the new space had its own reality. Well, when we were asked to do a house on an island, that's in the bottom picture, we basically had that context to deal with, and essentially we made a sculpture that could be seen from all around with views on the inside. In my own house, we have these incredible 250-year-old white oak trees. It's Connecticut. White oak is basically the state tree. And you see we actually made a barn building for us 25 years ago. And instead of denying the tree or just sort of waving at it, the building actually worships the tree. The tree is actually part of the interior of this porch that we did. So whether it's this community, that's one thing, but this community that I showed you before with 15 units of housing on the upper right, that was set on a terrain. It is a quarter of an acre, by the way. It's a quarter of an acre, and it dropped 20 feet in about 60 feet. What do you do with that? Well, what we did with that was able to get the density, the 15 units. So every unit has light, and we basically have no elevator because we have access for enough units that we meet code from below and above. That idea of using the context to make a community face upper right and then a city face to downtown Yonkers lower right, using what was given to us on the lower left, that's the way architects can transform things versus deny them or Xerox them. That's what I think is done in the context, the cauldron of context. And what we can do can be tasteless and bland or disgusting, or it could be so spicy as to be unpalatable. It could be so nothing and Xeroxy that you don't even notice it's there. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. Or it could be so unbelievably distinct that it actually is maybe a little bit scary and nauseating. But I think the best food that you can do, the human spice, is when you combine things in a way that the way you make them is both evidenced and is also celebrated. And so we do a lot of work that uses steel for shear on the far upper left. We do a lot of timber work that you see on the lower left. We also do combining things like you see in the lower right, and that barn that you saw, there it is under construction. And it's because probably this is informed by the fact that my first 9 years out of the profession, I worked a bunch of the time in a shop with an architect partner, but as just a flunky in the shop. Well, these things all deal with pre-existing pretensions of the architect. And so we do these things where we come up with ideas like this for a student center at a school. We were in competition with three other architects, and surprise, surprise, we lost. However, the design lent itself to make a presentation which I think lives with me today because it allows you to see the thing as it really would be and maintain the gist of the sketch you see on the left that was the first thing I ever drew in the project. Well, I think that starts me thinking about how do you start this? I think about the ways things can be done. So here are two literally identical houses. Might not look that way. They're both four-bedroom, 1,400 square foot homes. I am the architect. They have a defined footprint. On the left, it's the existing foundation. On the right, it's every FEMA regulation known to mankind. They have completely different owners, a very young family left and an empty nest older family on the right. They have very different sites. Coastal on the left, coastal on the right, with again the major FEMA reality, and Hilltop on the left. And they have as different a budgets as you could possibly have. One is under $300 on the left, and one is over $1,000 a square foot on the right. So they both benefit from this practice that I sort of evolved in the first 10 or 15 years of doing this. And they involve a ton of research before you start, so you don't think about ideas without thinking about context. I have them use a yours questionnaire from the Place of Houses book. The two living authors said that's a fantastic idea 25 years ago when I asked if I could do it. But I also have them do extreme priorities list, photographs of things they like from the internet or books or whatever, magazines. And I asked them to draw directly on the existing condition drawings we make, or even just draw. And we have many meetings. So that process fulfills what Christopher Alexander called in that seminar that I told you about for the place of order. Um, is not the place of order. The anyway, that seminar, he says that houses basically manifest the uniqueness of people's individual worlds. So it's not just about the person, it's about the uniqueness, but it's also about the world around them. So the first one is this house with an engineer and a landscape architect. Here's the existing home. We had to keep the existing foundation. There wasn't enough latitude budgetarily to do more than that. So the house sits on that. They did a bunch of the drawings themselves, engineer, landscaper, they know how to draw. So they drew all the existing stuff. There was an existing relic of sort of archaeology of a shed that was out back. We measured that, we drew that, we actually figured out what was there, and he gave us a quick sketch of what he wanted. We told him, well, you have to get the plumbing on the upper right-hand side because it goes into the existing septic system. And we said, you have to hold this thing together with essentially concrete beams on the top of the whole perimeter of the building so it wouldn't fall down. We originally thought, well, it'd be nice to get all the floors level and make a simple roof that would defer. Its low side is the house side. There's the lower the sketch on the right. And they said, yeah, no, I think we want to go the other way, which was fine. But what they really needed from me, and a lot of you too, is they really needed a building permit. And they chose me because they realized who had been around, and they interviewed five of us. And the interview, all five they interviewed. The rest said, well, I think, I could show you what you could do. And I said, well, tell me what you want to do, and I'll help you do it. And that freaked them out because I was 65 years old or 67 years old. Why would I actually say, I'll do what you want to do, but you're hiring me, so I'm going to tell you what would be a good idea to do also. So we came up with this together, this way of making this building. We thought it was going to be the way what they would occupy as they built it, but that didn't work out. It took way too long to build. So this got almost done, stopped because they had to move out to live with somebody's parents, and it turned out quite nicely, but it's totally unfinished. It served as a warehouse to take this building, which again, they measured. They had some ideas. They played around with it. They went to me with all of their thoughts. We then came back with them with our thoughts. And so what ends up happening is we make a really neat little building. They were obsessed with the stair. They couldn't afford the spiral, the angling stair that met all the code that we researched. But we went with very tall ceilings, very steep pitch to get a third floor. And we made this building, which will have a huge solar array eventually on the side. And after many talks, they basically decided to go with the existing wing as a solar generator, which was a greenhouse. You see there in the upper right, the lower left of the upper right, you'll see that. And it ends up heating the whole house during a sunny day in the winter. And it just does. It's amazing. I was there. And that works as bookends for the main body of the house. And as you can see, in a little tiny house, 10 and a half foot ceilings are king. They're amazing. They're fantastic. And you could see the entry was dense packed and with very thoughtful use of materials and details. And every window that was so expensive it was surgically placed. And so that level of openness and precision is matched by the expressiveness of aligning walls, of using color, and making things super tight and taller than hoped for, including the upper floor where there's this really cool climbing wall. And that's who there's the landscape architect and her two children. So the full house is the exact opposite. The full house is a second home. There was no issue of money. The previous house, money was just fought over. Took over 2 years to build the house. Everything was GC'd by them. This house had one of the best GCs in the universe, and had us do every drawing humanly possible. I think our fee on that tiny project and that tiny amount was probably 3%, and our fee on this house, which had a huge budget, was probably more like 14 or 15%. So huge amount of fee for the first one. For the second one, huge amount of fee. Not so much fee for the first one. And it was all about dealing with the things that I'm sure many of you do with coastal conditions that are incredibly tight. So this was like less than an eighth of an acre. We ended up doing models as we always do when we are asked to fulfill a design thing, came up with an idea of a celebrated corner because it's the end of the street. It also has incredible views in all ways and a garage underneath. We thought we could do this, but then the zoning officer said, oh, no, 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 no. The interpretation is you have to have half the square footage on the second floor that you have on the first floor. So we did this. And you can see because of this incredibly tight zoning regulation, we went with curves, not for the artsy, ooh, isn't it cool curves. It was because I needed to get 6'8" headroom on the second floor and keep it at 50% of the floor below it. So that expressive, zesty, ooh, architecty thing came straight out of the FEMA code and the zoning code. And we made this. And it's about as good as I can do in terms of weatherability and durability. And it also complies with a zillion different dimensional regulations with a plan that basically has little tiny bedrooms with an ensuite bath and a bath for three other bedrooms and a full bath downstairs. And you can begin to see kind of the way this is balanced and is expressed. And the incredible views at the backside of the salt marsh. And through that corner window, we avoid the views of a really ugly house, but we actually see another house, and we make the stair the central volume of the building airbag volume be something that grabs light and brings it into the rest of the house and vents the house. And that's all done with models to figure this out beforehand so that we could actually see what's going on and evolve it. And you can see how this, everything here you see is steel, by the way. This is a completely steel structure because there's no way that you could be this stiff with this much glass in that condition. All the bedrooms are tiny. They really are bedrooms. They have just enough room for a chair. They're all stuck into a corner. They've got storage underneath. They all have little closets. You can see how the 6'8" on the far left side slide of that image, that 6'8" was precise. And the square footage is limited because the closets are only 5 feet 11 inches tall. Because it was 6 feet tall, it would count towards the FAR. So above that becomes space for HVAC. Here's the corner bedroom. Again, the really ugly house is to the left of this. You can't see it. But basically from this bedroom, you get this incredible view of the salt marsh to the right and the sound to the left. There's the master bedroom, does the same thing. It's got its own little roof. It's got huge overhangs to prevent overheating and weathering. It's got 4 spaces that are outside but directly accessed from the house, a screen porch, this balcony, an actual porch, and then a covered porch. Right here you see at the front, that's the covered porch. So these things, and I've got 10 minutes, these things are all part of something I came up with trying to figure out beyond architecture is human, what the hell am I doing? And when you teach design at UHeart or anywhere, when you're asked to teach design, my ethic is to say, well, I should tell the people I'm teaching, what do I do? And that's how I'm teaching. And you can agree with it, disagree with it, but it's not like saying this is the right way. This is what I do. And I came up with these principles, very simple, in order: connection, ascendance, welcome, order, threshold, reward. Actually, threshold, reward are one thing, and balance. So connection is the house to the landscape. This tall building here basically meshes with the trees. This house in California, that the other one was in Maine, this is California. This deals with the low growth of everything to the right and these incredibly beautiful conifers that ascend at one end of the site. The connection between the humanity of the people that we're working with and what we do is as absolute as any other connection. That says to me that because I think the element of human reality is that we want to be uplifted and inspired and not depressed and intellectually challenged. I think ascendance, it's not vertical, it's actually the aspirational, focal, experiential reality. The aspirational reality is part of what's incumbent upon me to give to clients. And this is a synagogue we just finished a couple of years ago in Madison, Connecticut. And that ascendance uses everything. It uses the sort of ascending entry roof work that you see on the upper left, this incredible stair in the house in Maine you saw, this tiny footprint that can grow to 3 stories because the zoning code in the middle, the ascendance of my own living room that's now 40 years old, and it captures the west light. Welcome then, after you've basically done the tasks of connecting and actually ascending. Well, the idea that you can bring somebody to these two very positive things means that the welcome you have, the idea of invitation is there. This is a house in Vermont. These are houses in New York that basically these are for formerly homeless veterans. So they're very low budget. And they actually make something which is both expressive and quite easy to build and normative and met the budget. And that entry, that greeting thing isn't just about the front door. Here we had a house on the left that we had designed. You can see the entries there on the lower left. There was a garage that we helped locate, made by somebody else, but they wanted to turn this into a ADU. So we had to get people from the garage that was below covered up out to the level of the house. So we made a roof that made a new entry for the ADU, which is to the right of the right-hand image, and made coverage actually for the stair coming up from the garage. And they just liked the idea of doing something that was expressive, and that's what we did. On that same synagogue you saw, this manifests order. So order is the thing that we can't manipulate. It basically is there has to be some kind of structure. There has to be some kind of HVAC system. There has to be things that we use to make buildings. We're not actually sculpting out of clay. So here we use the structure that was existing to launch new structure there you see in the right and make this incredible covered space. In that church you saw, that order of the connected pew ends that you see with these white oak verticals, that order resonates with the order of the existing church. The order of the way steps have to be, you can see that on either side of the middle center of the screen. That necessity for stairs is an opportunity for expression as well as having a stair that is comfortable. And again, here the structure is celebrated in that house renovation that you see on the right with cladding these columns with oak. Threshold and reward is pretty simple. It's basically you see something, there's a framed focal point, you go towards it, you usually go through it, and then there's a reward afterward. Reward in Madison, Connecticut for this athletic complex we worked on for 12 years for free because we love our town, where there's a threshold and a reward of the athletic complex. These thresholds and rewards beckon, frame, focus, arrive, and there's a reward at the end. This house that you see here was there. We built a new little house on the left, and in between them, we made literally a threshold. These thresholds can frame the bottom of a stair. This is seen at entry. They can frame in that house that you saw before. The windows have an opening. The windows have an opening, which are double doors, and that goes out to that view. There's actually the desk you see in the upper right that just its curve centers on a window. The windows below that, the sequence of windows leads to that slight explosion of the triangular transom. And the curves of the Ithieltown church that you saw before, that Episcopal Cathedral, we use those curves to celebrate what is normally called a ramp. It's just a way to come in that says everybody is welcome to come. On the left, there's that building that you saw before, and that corner building actually ends up having these corner windows that actually look out to the water and avoid the ugly house you can barely see to the right. In a Lutheran church we did, there was actually an internal narthex that takes you, receives you, frames you, and then launches you into the sanctuary, lower right. Here's that synagogue I talked about, where the whole building is essentially a series of rewards, of thresholds and rewards from entry through all the way to the final reward of the bima and the arc that you see here. That will be the construction shop, but will be the actual focal point center of the synagogue. In all of this, the net thing we want to do is create balance. And it's basically using all those things that we talked about to make something that is fancily called hierarchy, but it's meant to actually give a sense that we have actually controlled this, whether it's actually through centers or through anything. We actually control how a building on the left, which is completely unorganized, actually becomes something which is expressive of its different organizations. And inside of a house we did a long time ago in Long Island, The interior has a void for a stair and has a positive for a chimney, all balancing each other. In this renovation we did, this entry, which is this proud vertical element, is basically balanced by the long existing shape using windows. A fireplace in a gable form, and in addition, we do make for a little dance with a low roof. That house that you saw before uses the stairwell on the right and the tower on the left and the curving form in the middle to make a balance. An existing footprint becomes a building that you see down below that balances between the old and the new. And this house we did just takes a shape and evolves it to create a balance between entry of cars, entry of people, and expression of shape. So essentially, balance is what I think all of this ends up aspiring to, but conscious balance. The balance that says, I am in control here. This is who I am. And I know enough how things are built so that I can understand the cost and actually give back to people what I think is actually something that they could never do on their own or think about on their own, nor could AI do it on any other watch. So this thing that we're doing, architecture, is really us. It's who we are for ourselves, these clients that we have. It's a human thing. It's not an intellectual thing. It's not a rule book. It's not a Bible. It's essentially using who we are and discovering what's always been there, discovering it, not creating it. So understand that this only happens when you listen. When you proclaim, you cannot hear. If you only hear you, then you are just you for you. When we listen, hear what we cannot know, then balance happens. And that's my last slide. And it's exactly 45 minutes. I have succeeded again. I'm a good person.
2 for 2, Duo. Two for
Yeah,
two.
I'm ripe for failure now. It's all downhill.
There you go. Uh, Fantastic presentation as I expected. Thank you very much. Inspiring. And I'm going to lead off Q&A, and I see Cheryl's question there, and I'm going to expand on that. Such a beautiful collection of projects. And I know you are prolific as an architect. You have probably thousands of projects.
Well,
Out.
1,000, I think.
Okay. Well,
1,000.
there are a lot of them, and so many of them are very, very creative and inspiring. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy on projects and talk a little bit about fees and your philosophy
Sure.
on fees?
Well, the project is pretty simple. The essence is that I've never been to an emergency room where they turn you away because your cut isn't long or deep enough. If anybody needs anything, I talk to them. And like everybody else, I don't care who you are, if you have any sense of yourself, you don't charge for the first visit. The idea of creating your value by charging money in advance when you're not haven't proven any value is the inversion of value. It's actually denigrates what you do. So you're doing it for the money. Truth is, you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because that's what you were born to do. So I take on all comers. There, I will never design a skyscraper. I mean, anything over $10 million is probably a bad idea for me because I've got a staff of 6. I don't have a staff of 16 or 60. So the idea is that I'm almost self-limiting in that regard. And that's because I could never have a partner. So in a way, you make these choices, they determine what you are comfortable doing, and you do it. Then everything after that becomes, did you actually do something that made sense in the world and got billed? Well, that's number one. Well, how do you do that with fees? So fees, for a long time, I had two fees. I had a fee that was an hourly rate for the lowest possible fee I could do would be to crunch my hours as small as possible, give people basically a percentage of construction budget that was apprehendable. I say it's between 8% and 12%. Somewhere will be in there. Now we've just done projects down at 3 and 5 and 7%, so that it can, if the client takes on more, we do less. And then I had something that was actually a percentage fee, and I did a that was for people that really didn't care, that wanted to spend as much money as they could, and that was maybe 5% of the work. And what ended up happening there was that it just never worked out, and I took a huge bath on every job because the person that said, "Oh no, that really doesn't count towards your fee. Oh no, that's really not part of the project budget. Oh no, no." So what ends up happening is that I take a bath. So I ended that about 20 years ago and said everything is an hourly basis. I'm just changing the expectations of the client, saying I need a really big retainer for again this 5%. It's to be maintained about 5% of the work, where people say really the fee is not as important as getting through and doing everything we want to do, all the options we want to see. So that's that. Well, lurking in here is the pro bono aspect of of my work, which has been
Right.
there forever. And it's usually around 30% of the work starts as pro bono. And I'm just called by people and saying, could you do this for us? And I said, we can't pay. I said, well, you don't have to pay me. We'll go through as far as I can. And at some point, either you've got to pay me or you tell me you really can't. And if you really can't, then maybe I can still do it, because the truth is that's why I've been put on this earth, is to is to do what I've been given to do. I didn't earn this. I didn't learn this. This is what I've been given to do. So that is almost always with a fixed fee contract in an AIA format that a funder can follow. And there I really try to do the thing of doing as little as possible based on the nature of the work. And that basically works out. It doesn't work out all the time, but it does work. It does work out. And about half of that stuff never gets built because it's just you're helping them discover what they want. On the other side, we build almost 70% of what we start. Pretentious architects typically build less than half of what they start. That means what you start is when you get a retainer and a contract. Less than half of those things get built. We're like approaching or around 70% for the last 40 years. And that's only because aren't doing this for the money. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do. And also we kind of know how stuff is built. So it really is nuts and bolts kind of stuff. The creativity element of it, the fact that some of it maybe makes people very happy, is almost out of my control. This is the sort of stuff that I just do. It's not like I study it or like, oh, I think I want to do this. It just is there. And we show the one element that we show everybody, by the way, is multiple options at the beginning. Now, in teaching at the University of Hartford, I I have many architects come and give Zoom calls to us. I would say that I am in the minority. The vast majority of really good architects say, this is what I think you should do. This is it. They wait till the client objects. When the client objects, they change the design based on what the client suggests, not following what the client does, but listening to the client's concerns. I use the design process as a communication reality, as I do all those models you saw. None of them are presentation models. The models we do are actually meant to communicate. They're not meant to persuade.
Yeah.
Or even to tell somebody what you want to do. They say, this is where, what do you think of this? And sometimes they hate it. And that's good, because you should know what they don't want in a model, not when the thing is being built. So the truth is, people can't read drawings. I can read drawings sort of, but I can't read drawings like a model tells me what a design is. So the idea of using money, knowledge, options, models to put the client, who's another human being, by the way, just like I was saying, put the client in the with you to create this is is the only way I think you can succeed over a long period of time. You'll have terrific successes in any way you want to do it, but to actually do the most stuff with what you've been given, you got to be the most open to the client. And that means the most open about who you are to the client, not I'm a vessel for what you want to do. Otherwise, if you do that, there's no reason to hire you. And there, by the way, very soon they will not hire anyone. They'll just spend $750, get the AI package to design the building themselves, because that's what's going to happen.
Greg Burke, actually, Greg and John have similar questions or comments and questions. Greg says, not so much a question, but a comment. A pattern language and a timeless way of building seem to
Mm.
have had a tremendous influence on your work. Congratulations on not falling into the style debate. And then John says, I see a bit of Ife Jones with your exposed and expressive wood structure frames. Who or what or how else do you find inspiration? You want to talk on that a little bit?
I'll do that. And I know, what have I got? 10 minutes left,
Yep.
less? Okay.
7.
I'm going to spend one of the 10 minutes to say this story. So I give a talk at the University of Arkansas in 1988. And I go there because I've written a book, and the kids are all asleep and I'm giving the talk. But before I give the talk, the professor who's showing me around says, "Oh, Professor Jones, that's Ife. Professor Jones really wanted to come, but he has a deadline. He can't come." I said, "Oh, damn it. Okay. No, no, no. He wants you to come by 8 o'clock tomorrow to his office." So I go to the office. Now I'm 33 years old. I go to the office. And he says, "Oh, Duo, this is so great. Your books are great. You're great. Blah, 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 blah." And we're like, "Mr. Jones?" I'm quaking, "Mr. Jones." He goes, "Oh, it's a good thing you came." I said, "I just finished going over all the money, all the fees and everything for the Thorn Crown Chapel." I go, "Yeah, I just figured out. Now, this is, I realized 1988. I just realized that we lost cold hard cash. We lost $7,000. Oh, yeah, I do. That's bad." He goes, "Look at this. That's the best thing I'll ever do." And I go, "Well, that actually validates this.
Yes.
It validates this." The other thing, which is the other thing that this is a really crazy thing to say, but like a lot of people, I had a fairly compromised childhood. It wasn't like, oh boy, let's have all this fun stuff. But I went to private school. I went to an Ivy League college. I mean, there's nothing wrong with anything that happened to me, except the parents involved never said anything positive except could you hand me could you hand me the glass? I need another drink.
Yeah.
So you go through that and you never believe your own hype. You never are convinced that what you're doing is okay. You look at everything like saying, is this okay? So when you use the client to actually see how they react to options, and one of the options is always exactly what they want, and I mean that. I do precisely what the client wants, just in a floor plan, and I do it in the most ethical way possible. Say, this is what you can do if this is what you want. Then I show them something else that is maybe a little bit different, and then I show them something which is different. And I can tell you for a fact that 70% is a hybrid. Only one is what they want, and one is what is crazy. Most of everything is in between.
Yeah.
And I think that shows that the human condition is something about connection. It's not about expression. It's about listening.
Yeah. With the few minutes we have left, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with building beauty and your experience with Christopher Alexander?
Well, again, I am an Episcopalian, which is a burden, but so I basically have this, you know, religious. I know the Bible. So at some point, after 2 or 3 years in, and they invite me to be on their call every week from somewhere. I don't really know why I'm there, right? They have me come teach. They like what I do. I give a talk every once in a while, but I ain't no Alexandrian. I've read some of this stuff, and I think it's fantastic. I taught it. I taught it at Roger Williams at the Time Study Building. I know all this stuff, um, but I'm just not that. I mean, I don't have this. I don't have this way of thinking about things that is so precise. So at one point, I say to them, it's all Europeans except me, except for Susan Ingham, who's an incredible human being. But anyway, everybody's not American. I say at one point, am I the most American person you know? They said, well, yes. That's why you're here. And I go, okay. I said, okay. I said, well, at one point later, I said, so what? Why would you have me be part of this to this level? He says, well, you do, you live, you are what Chris did. You just are completely different. And I go, so what you're saying is I am Saul of Tarsus. Who? Who's Saul of Tarsus? And I go, well, I can't really say that I'm St. Paul yet, but basically I am on the road to Emmaus. So, and I do actually feel somehow that there's something there that I know you get totally, and I know I get, but we're not the same person. I'm the tax collector. I'm not like the oppressed. I'm from the legitimate American building world of architecture, and they're from this whole intellectual universe that's all over the world and incredible.
Yeah.
So I think building beauty is essentially I am kind of the useful fool for them. In other words, I really do venerate what they do, and I do what a lot of times what they would do, but I'm not them.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. For anybody who's interested, at buildingbeauty.org, I posted it
Yes.
in the chat before. Um, it's an
Incredible.
international
And the
design
seminar, by the
program.
way, the seminar is free. So you can actually join the seminar and great speakers,
Yep.
great stuff. So you can absolutely do that. And there's other things you do as well. So and also you could also email me if you're interested because we'll get you all done.
Yeah. All right, Joe, we're going to wrap up. It's
Yes,
just coming up on 3. Thank you for a great
it's a pleasure.
presentation. I always enjoy having conversations with you. Always inspiring. And so thank you.
You guys are doing great. EntreArchitect, go, go, go.
Thank you. His name is Duo Dickinson, Duo Dickinson Architect. DuoDickinson.com is the website. And if you go to the media section, it has all the information about his podcast and his books and all the things that he does. So go to duodickinson.com/newmedia.html is where it is. But if you go to duodickinson.com and click the top button there, you'll get it. The session's been recorded and will be available in the channel next week. And watch out for your evaluation forms so you can get credit for the session. And if you need a certificate of completion, admin@entrearchitect.com. Next month, Catherine Serrano Sosa is joining us, designing empowering spaces, inclusive, accessible, and client-friendly environments. That's going to be the HSW session next week or next month. Duo, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're the best. You guys are all great. Keep going. Don't stop.